live.
Facebook, on Instagram, all this.
All right, and we're live. Okay, hey everyone. Welcome to Legalbytes. As always, I'm Alita. I'm a lawyer. And on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So I'm very, very thankful today that I have two guests. One of them is running a little bit behind, but he'll join us shortly. One is, of course, you may know of him, James Varga, also known as PhantomL0rd. And then joining us soon will be his attorney, Bill Quinlan. So if you don't know, James, should I call you James or PhantomL0rd?
What is easier for you? Because I don't mind. I think it's kind of, it doesn't matter. Call me James, I guess.
Okay, I can call you James. So James just recently won a pretty big lawsuit against Twitch, the streaming platform that is super popular among gamers. If you don't know, now you know. And he's been in this lawsuit for, I mean, how many years? You filed the complaint in what, 2018, right?
Yeah, well, I think 2017 actually. So
okay.
2017 or so. It's actually, no, you're right. The filing started in late 2017, early 2018, but it was kind of behind the scenes in sometime 2017. So
okay, yeah. And it was actually a little bit longer than that because you were kicked off of the platform in what, 2016?
2016, yes, in July.
Okay, so we're going to talk in this live stream. We're going to talk about obviously the lawsuit. We're going to go over James's allegations against Twitch, and then we're also going to talk about Twitch's allegations against James. So I know that there's a lot of controversy surrounding PhantomL0rd, surrounding James. There's a lot of people commenting, of course, I mean, even on Twitter, on, when we were posting about this live stream, a lot of people talking about allegations about scamming viewers on CSGO Shuffle. We'll get into what all of that means. And we'll get into the way that fits into Twitch's allegations against him and the evidence that came out on those issues. So this is what's very interesting to me about this case is that, anytime you have a lawsuit that is that's in public interest, that people are very, very interested in, you have what we call two different courts. There's the court of law and the court of opinion. And when someone is fighting the fight in a court of law, they often can't talk about their lawsuit. So they really can't fight the fight in the court of public opinion. So now that the lawsuit is over, he's able to talk about a lot of this stuff, not everything, but a lot of this stuff. And I'm very, very grateful that you were willing to talk with me on this channel. So we will, yeah. So bring your questions, guys, for sure. We can't guarantee that we'll be able to get to all of them, partly because of maybe possibly volume, but also because of possible continuing confidentialities. So there are some things that may or may not be able to be answered today. And I'm sorry, you're just going to have to live with that. That's just the nature of legal issues. But with that, how about we start with an introduction? So James, what's your background with Twitch and with gaming and with gaming streaming?
Sure. So streaming is kind of a mainstream. What is it? What's the word I'm looking for? It's something that everyone knows about now. It's a common thing. But back then, I started way back in 2010, 2011. Mainstream is the thing I was trying to say. It wasn't back then. It wasn't. It was something that was kind of new. It was only in sort of the gamer realm. People were messing around with the technology, and it was very limited at the time, so you couldn't really broadcast successfully. But I have been streaming since 2010, 2011. I originally started on a website called Own3D, which I believe was a European company. Streamed on there for a little bit, and they eventually went under. They had financial issues, and Twitch bought me out. I moved with my partner manager and a lot of other people to Twitch in 2012. And around that time, I was playing League of Legends. I was a professional gamer. I attended the LAN events, played professionally in several different tournaments over the years, and then sort of decided at one point that it's really hard to compete at top level. I mean, there's some really good players out there. And nowadays you have tournaments where there's $1 million prize pool for the first place. But back then it was like, $5,000 or something really small. So it was really just kind of a niche thing. I loved it, but it was just too intense. So eventually I made a transition to just kind of being an entertainer, having fun, being silly, and my audience loved it. And that's kind of where I took it just over the years, doing different things. Of course, it was still kind of focused on gaming, but I remember I was one of the first people to do a cooking stream on Twitch. Just new things I tried out, and then transitioned to different games, and then eventually, 2016 is when I got my account suspended, and since then I've been kind of focused on the lawsuit.
Okay, so yes, you have it. You have, my understanding is you have not been streaming for a number of years now, right?
Only recently, but yeah, there was a transition period where, and I can get very much into this. Lawsuits are tough. It's no joke. Especially going against Amazon, you have to kind of give it your all. And during the last kind of streams I had, I think it was in 2019, people were just kind of seeking to take things out of context, and things like, I really wanted to talk about the lawsuit, but I couldn't, and that could be used in some sort of manner to make me look bad or whatnot. So I just decided to make a transition to focus full time on the lawsuit, and every single paper that was filed, every conversation, I involved myself, and I was there every step of the way. And I know that contributed to not only educating my lawyers on the case and the details, but helping for us to win.
And that is so important because, lawyers will definitely know the law, but they may or may not know the world that you're coming from. And so that's very helpful that you were able to do that and really dedicate all that time. But obviously that's going to take a lot of time out of your life, years out of your life, pretty much. So, I mean, litigation is, oh yeah. I mean, litigation.
I'm like so passionate about, I've lost so much of my life. And again, I'm not trying to victimize myself, but lawsuits are not fun. They take everything out of you, and I'll go into more detail later, but it's just not fun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that in a bit. So let's kind of go through a little bit of the timeline of what happened. So you had a contract with Twitch starting in 2012, I think.
Yes, I signed a partnership agreement in 2012. Yes.
And that partnership agreement was basically, it was like a contract to stream exclusively with Twitch, right?
Yes.
Or what was, okay. So that is a little bit different than your average Twitch streamer that doesn't have a partnership agreement, right? That is just operating under the terms of service.
I believe there's 3 levels. So there's a regular user. Okay. There's just regular partners, and then there's the very top 0.01%, which have custom contracts, which we discovered during the trial. So those are the 3 kind of branches.
Okay. Interesting. So what level? I mean, obviously you weren't at that lower level. Were you middle or? So
I believe the custom contracts didn't start happening until after 2016, 2017, when the bidding war, I know you tapped into it kind of with Dr. Disrespect. When Mixer came out and other streaming platforms started to come out, this bidding war happened where people were getting exclusive contracts, demanding them to stream a certain amount of hours, or information that reached out to their social media that they had to only focus on, whatever. That's kind of what happened. So I wasn't a part of that. It didn't really exist at my time, but it's safe to say I was still top of that tier around the time.
Okay. So that makes sense. So then you had an extension to the contract, I think in 2014, according to the papers, the pleadings. Yeah. And then so that basically just extended your contract out, maybe added a few different terms in, probably. I don't know if you may.
No, it was. I know a little bit about it.
Okay.
And Bill can comment more on it later, but it was just so I actually had no idea the really details of my contract. I was just happy to stream. I mean, I just played video games. It seems naive, but that's the reality of it. I mean, there's examples across other, sports, for example, of someone who's young and, not really knowing, just focusing on what the talent is. But I later discovered during this litigation that that 2014 contract was just a renewal, and it was literally 2 pages. It was just the cover page, and where I signed, and then the second page was just like saying that this is supposed to audit and renew every year. And I believe the other term is giving 90 days a notice for non-renewal, which never happened.
Okay. Yeah, and we can get into that when we get into sort of like more of what happened related to your getting banned from Twitch. So then in 2000, so actually going into that 2016, then you were suspended from the platform, right?
Yes.
So then what were the communications between you and Twitch? Can you talk about that a little bit, about like, leading up to the suspension? Because I know that there were allegations in your complaint about, misrepresentations and, things that you relied upon going into, leading up to the suspension.
It's important to keep in mind that there's two kind of ways to look at this situation. One is in the present, so when I was there at the time, 2016, and then now kind of looking back, knowing all the internal conversations and what really was going on. And just to tap on it lightly, in 2016, was kind of streaming as I always did, and received my first 40-hour suspension for something of a skit with my wife, Victoria Weeks, who, we just were doing this like always. It's just something we did normally. And out of nowhere, just kind of, okay, you can't do this anymore, and here's a punishment. So it was kind of, the communication was diluted by my partner manager. His name is Opie, Jason Opie Babo. And then, of course, the allegations were released, and then I got suspended. And it was just a mess of not knowing what was going on. But looking back, now I kind of understand the whole transition. I understand what people said on the stand and the reasons for the ban, which I kind of have a good idea now on what it's about. But at the time, I had no idea. Yeah.
Okay. So and I want to focus in really quick because not everyone might be familiar with you said the partner manager. So is this somebody that works for Twitch or worked for Twitch at the time that was like assigned to you because you were a partner with Twitch?
Yes. So this is actually very important. He was not present during the trial, and we don't really know why Twitch didn't bring him in. Well, I have assumptions is that he doesn't really like Twitch and wouldn't talk favorably of them. But Opie is what I'll call him, my partner manager, was with me since Own3D. So that was part of the kind of buyout where he stayed as my partner manager, and he was focusing on the European kind of section. So most of the people of my peers were all managed by North American partner managers. So I was kind of a unique situation because I came over earlier with him. But he's someone that was responsible of communicating not only the rules, but also of things that I was doing wrong or educating me on new changes and stuff. It was literally my conversations with him were talking to Twitch. So that was his job, is to kind of manage me and look over. And then over the time, which we can elaborate further, he sort of had a tendency to be nice to both sides, which actually made the conversation diluted on the seriousness and where a lot of the kind of complications started.
Okay. And he technically, so after reading the complaint, so he shows up in the allegations in the complaint, it looks like he's technically an employee of Twitch, which I think is kind of important to your case. So he's under their control. He's representing the things that he's telling you are representations from Twitch.
Yes, exactly. He was an employee at the time. And again, my communications with him were as if I was talking directly to Twitch.
Right.
He was all I spoke to, basically.
Okay. So then after you were inexplicably banned, then did you try communicating with them any further, to try to figure out what was going on?
Yes.
Or what happened?
So the day of my suspension, I actually called him, and this was part of the evidence during trial. I recorded the phone calls with OP and the things he said, which kind of were all over the place again, but leading me in a direction that was basically saying, Twitch can't help you. You have to go and do other things. So misdirection, whatnot. Just basically a mess. And just a slight comment on it. I worked for Best Buy for 5.5 years, and a lot of people work for professional companies. This is not the way you're supposed to handle these things. And he was more of a buddy. I understand it from his point of view, but like that's just kind of not how things are supposed to be done. They're supposed to be carried with seriousness, and then also further, straight direction. This is what has to be done. This is what's happened. That was not the case.
Yeah. Now, so this kind of reminds me of, so I practiced employment litigation for a bit, and I was mostly representing the employees that had been, for all kinds of reasons, either terminated or had all kinds of issues with their employer. This kind of reminds me of something that I started to see as a pattern in those kind of cases. Now, obviously, your case is not an employment case. You were not an employee of Twitch. You had a contract with them. So this was a contract case.
Yeah.
But it kind of reminds me a little bit of what I've seen a lot in employment litigation cases, where that central person is usually the HR person. And it usually kind of comes down to them and their ability to communicate with one side and the other. It kind of reminds me of that.
Correct.
So.
Yes. Yeah, and going back to the example of Best Buy, when I got in trouble, or if it was just like something that I needed to be informed, I got brought into a room. The tone was very serious, and I had to sit down in this small room and have the discussion, and then I had to sign a paper saying what's happening and that I understand. And this is what we'll eventually talk about more in depth with Opie. The communications had LOL, not a big deal. They were played down all the time, and again, that's what kind of misled me on what's actually happening, the seriousness of it all.
Yeah. Okay. So then, and one more point that I think I want to kind of highlight before we move on is you mentioned earlier in the contract that there was a requirement that if there was any sort of a breach by either side, that the other party that hadn't breached had to give 30 days to cure the breach, right?
Correct.
So basically there should have been, the allegation in the complaint was that there should have been 30 days where you and Twitch were kind of trying to work things out to get you back on the platform. So it sounds like that didn't actually happen.
No, it's a very simple concept. And this is kind of what I guess I'm kind of striving and fighting for right now. And a lot of the people in the public can understand what I'm talking about when streamers are getting punished. We don't know what's going on. We're not told. So in my contract, I had a term where they were supposed to notify me of the reason and then give me 30 days to cure, basically 30 days to fix it. Since I didn't know what the reason was, there was no notification of it. And they tried to argue it in the court with saying terms of service, reasons for ban, terms of service, other. But it, fell on deaf ears from the jury, which kind of knew what was happening. So.
Yeah. So now this is perfect timing because it looks like we have Bill backstage. So I will bring him out so that everybody can meet him. So, all right. Hello.
Hi,
Mr. Quinlan. Can you hear us? Everything's good?
I can hear you fine. I had to get Google Chrome in order to get on, so I apologize.
Oh yeah, no worries. So just so that everyone knows, Mr. Quinlan is James's attorney. So the lead attorney on his case against Twitch. So should I call you Bill or Mr. Quinlan? Because I'm usually default to formal.
Bill works great.
Okay. So we were just going through sort of the timeline of events, starting from when he started streaming with Twitch, and then all the way up until when he got banned from Twitch, and sort of the communications, what he knew, what he didn't know. And so this is kind of perfect timing because what I want to do is actually go through some of the allegations in the complaint, and then some of the allegations in Twitch's counter or cross complaint against James, and sort of some of those allegations and the evidence that came out in this at trial. So I don't know if there's anything going into it that you want to say before we pull those documents up.
No, I guess I'd say pull it up, but I'm happy to talk. And I joined a little late, so
no worries.
Jump right in, but
no worries. It's perfect timing because what's great about this setup is that, obviously James can talk about his experiences and you can kind of give us sort of the legal expertise side to sort of talk about the strategy and whatnot.
Sure,
yeah. So, okay. So I will show this. So here is the complaint. And I will go right to so those are my highlighting here on the the factual allegations here, and we kind of went through that timeline just now. And then I will go right to the first cause of action. So there were, in your complaint, there were what, 4 causes of action?
Correct.
There was breach of contract, breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, intentional misrepresentation. I know for a lot of people that are uninitiated to the law, this is word salad, but we'll break it down so that people can understand what's going on here. And then the 4th one was negligent misrepresentation. So we'll start with sort of breach of contract. So we talked about how James had a contract with Twitch, and then the allegation here is that Twitch breached the contract. So so I can see here that on July 16th, 2016, you can see right here in paragraph 60, Twitch materially breached the agreement by immediately and permanently suspending Varga's twitch.tv account without notice, opportunity to cure, or cause. So basically a breach of contract cause of action is what happens with in that kind of a case, or that kind of cause of action, Bill?
So I guess in short, a contract is what everyone would think it is, which is, usually it's in writing. People lay out, James lays out his obligations, Twitch lays out their obligations. They're both supposed to follow it. And, James was going to get paid X amount. He said he was going to stream on Twitch. Twitch said that they were going to provide him the opportunity, what they call the media player, to do that. And if James were to, quote, breach the contract the way it was set up and what James had bargained for. And just to step back, this is the standard sort of partnership contract that you're going to have tens of thousands of streamers that have this identical contract, okay? That Twitch would have to, and it makes sense, let James know, which is provide him notice is the legal term. Here's what you did wrong. And then he had 30 days to fix it, which is just, in legalese called an opportunity to cure. Twitch didn't even give any regard to this contract. They took the position that it's their platform. They can have whoever they want on it. They didn't need to give James any notice. They didn't need to give him an opportunity to fix whatever problems he had. And the jury found that James might have technically breached certain things of the contract by the fact that, like, for example, in the contract, it says things like you can't gamble. Well, Twitch allowed gambling. I mean, they have channels for gambling. And they said, well, based on their action, what was in the contract, they didn't hold anybody to it. And second, they didn't give James notice, and they didn't give him an opportunity to cure, which is exactly what he and all the other streamers had bargained for. So what you supposedly did wrong, and you get a chance to fix it.
Right. And so it seems like as this case was going on, now I skimmed through the entire docket. I spent like an entire day sort of living this case. Obviously, you've been living it for years, so that's nothing. But one thing that I noticed is that so the complaint that you guys filed was a breach of contract case, and it sounded like the case that Twitch was trying to litigate was that this was a terms of service case.
Correct. And they brought a counterclaim saying that James had breached. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. The terms of service and the community guidelines, which came a lot later. Yeah.
So one question that I had, I should probably back up first and say that my initiation to this type of issue was over the summer when I really started to pay more attention to all kinds of gaming issues and things like that. And I had heard about Dr. Disrespect, another streamer that was kicked off of Twitch, also for inexplicable reasons. And with all of the intrigue that's surrounded that, people have been filling it with all kinds of rumors and craziness. And so I made a video on Dr. Disrespect talking about, kind of this sort of tension of breach of contract cases versus, or breach of contract issues versus, Section 230, which is something that we can, I don't know if maybe we want to get into now or maybe a little bit later, but we can, but it's basically these two areas of law that are sort of at tension.
Right. I mean, and I will say, so, I mean, I guess, so everyone has Section 230 is part of the United States Code. It's a federal law. And what it basically says that the internet, as it sort of, when it first started, they passed this law that says that places like Facebook, Twitter, the internet is treated more like a bulletin board than it is a news or a publication that's regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, right? So that they don't have to, look at, the FCC doesn't regulate them, and they don't have to treat people at least identical, and they can sort of, it's their website, they can do what they want. Twitch tried to dismiss our case based upon that, and the California court said no. And they used an example that said, well, if you have an advertiser that you hire for Twitch, are you telling me that if they fail to perform, you can't sue them to make sure that they perform, and they can't sue you to try and collect what they've been paid? That's not the purpose of Section 230.
Right.
But Twitch tried everything they could to dismiss the lawsuit as we went through it. I mean, it was heavily litigated, and there was obviously teams of lawyers that they used to try and defeat James' case before he even saw the inside of a courtroom.
Right.
And so, I mean, the biggest issue when you talk about teams of service versus the contract, Twitch really takes the position that, like I said, consistent with 230, they can do whatever they want on their stream. They can decide who can stream and who can't, which, as far as I'm concerned, is just censorship. And so what came out with the jury when Twitch sued James for breaching the terms of service, they said, well, James did enter into a contract with the terms of service, but we don't think it's enforceable because they waived it, because they don't really believe in any rules. Because when it comes down to it, what Twitch does is when and they said this, there was a guy named Jason Maestas who just said, look, we can do business with whoever we want. If somebody's on our platform, we can just choose to get rid of them. And, at the end, for streamers and people like James and everyone else, I mean, you think you're operating with a set of rules that you can work within the guidelines, but at the end of the day, Twitch can just do whatever they want, and they don't really need a valid reason. So whether it's terms of service or whether it's contract, they don't seem to think they have to follow anything. And they even write in the terms of service they can still suspend you or ban you or throw you off for whatever they deem fit. So the jury got that. And listening over and over to the Twitch people that we had on the stand for days, talking about how there literally was no synergy, or there was there's no consistency, if you will, between why one person got banned and they didn't, and the way partners are treated versus the public is dramatically different. They use a phrase called context, which is just another word to say we can do whatever we want, which is we look at the context and we decide. And at the risk of maybe talking, they also had, which you're probably familiar with, this strike guide that was kept confidential, which is what they use to decide whether or not to punish the public. And with partners, they use it as whether or not to sort of elevate it, is the term they do, to the partnership conduct team. Well, this strike guide they wanted to keep secret. In fact, they went back to court to try and have it sealed, or at least portions of it. We've got, the ones that were talked about in court, the judge said no. But Twitch wants to make sure that the public doesn't know how there's this disparate treatment for people that they want to keep and make them the billions of dollars they make each year, versus somebody else that they, for whatever reason, want to choose to ban or suspend, or in James's case, to do it for political or public relations issues, so that they could hopefully get people to say, oh, look, they did take a strong stance. So they'll get rid of him to benefit all the other people that are doing things so much worse than whatever they claim.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to come out right now, especially with recently there was the hot tub meta issue that's been going around on Twitch. Yeah. It's very, very interesting. So, and I want to mention that. So you mentioned the strike guide that came out at trial. So it's my understanding that the actual strike guide itself, the document, is it's been sealed, right? So that can't actually be shared with anyone. Per the court's ruling.
That's not 100% correct. So
okay.
Portions of it have been redacted, which is
I see.
Whatever we talked about at the trial, the judges said, look, that's in the public domain. Jury heard it. People that were listening and watching heard it. That's fair game. What we didn't go through, and it's it looks like almost like a Chagall type, you're like a mosaic. It's, color coded, and it's something you could literally, put up on your wall. We didn't go through everything in there, and the portions we didn't, Twitch was able to get the court to seal. So that portion is, and I know James is going to talk about it, or has talked about it, kind of go through what we did. And the transcripts that we have is something that we could make available to you and your viewers, where you can see us asking questions of John Howell, who was head of North American Partnerships, and Ryan Kennedy and Jason Maestas, all about what this strike guide is. And Kennedy developed it. And it's not even from the terms of service, which is just, shocking. It's from what they call these community guidelines, which I don't really understand what any of this means. And I think the jury kind of made the point to say, look, none of it means anything, because it's just Twitch writing things down that they will tell you, hey, look, you got to follow this. But at the end, they don't really care whether you follow it or not, because they're going to do whatever they want.
Yep.
So that's what the basis is. And it's supposed to be absolutely used for the public. When it comes to partners, they raise it. And then this conduct team, along with the various liaisons or managers, decide whether to even raise it with the partner. And we went through certain people that did things that, they, after the fact, after they testified that at the end they didn't do any investigation, they didn't do this, they came in and tried to say about James, well, look, there's all these problems. He violated this rule and that rule and that rule. Well, we pointed out, at least one streamer and some other streamers that, had done that before, and they didn't enforce it at all. And in fact, in one person's case, they gave him a custom contract. Well, why? You could infer from that, well, he made him a lot of money. And at the end of the day, they're chasing a bottom line here. And so they're going to pick and choose whoever they want to put up there, which, again, is like, they're going to decide who they censor and who they don't. And they're not going to put a set rules that you as a streamer or you as the public can count on when you go and put your, many people put their livelihood out there. This is what they're counting on, basically paying their mortgage, paying their rent. And you can't count on them to basically follow those rules, because at the end they have the out to say we can do whatever we want.
Right.
And that was the case with James. And so, you're really left in a quandary that people, and that's what's so important about the second cause of action, just to sort of, pivot to that, right? Sure. Which is the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. The jury found that, right, that Twitch didn't act fairly, right? And
so
that they didn't act in good faith. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that people understand what that cause of action is. So basically, in every single contract that anyone enters into, not just with Twitch or with social media platforms, but any contract, there is this implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. It basically means that you're not going to do anything. You're not going to do anything to sabotage the contract in some way. Like, you're not going to do something that's acting unfairly under this contract so that the other person can't benefit under it. So anyway, sorry, I'll go back to you, Bill, for what the jury found and kind of what the evidence was on this, and I guess sort of what James's allegations were with that type of claim.
Right, and just as you said, that you're not entering into a contract for basically improper reasons, and you're going to use your good faith to try and follow it, and you want to act fairly. And the jury found that. And again, it comes back to these rules that really don't mean anything. That this contract that they entered into with James, they had no intention of following it or caring about it. They, there's testimony that said all these contracts like James were renewed all the time. And then they were saying, well, we didn't renew that, but they couldn't point to a specific letter or specific document that said, hey, excuse me, we're not renewing the contract, or we're going to terminate it, which they had a right to do. And we also went through evidence where when James was, they called him a sub, like, subscriber machine back in 2014. And even though the contract renewed automatically, they were afraid he might go to another platform. They were chasing him down to get him to sign an extension. I mean, that's how aggressively pursued it when they thought it would work for them. But when it didn't work for them, they just basically took the contract and threw it aside. Mm-hmm. And, they weren't acting fairly, and, they didn't act in good faith. I mean, they acted in bad faith. I mean, when you look at it, that's what the jury found. And I mean, that's a real telling thing when you talk about these contracts. And again, this is the standard contract for most streamers, whether you're Ninja, whether you were Dr. Disrespect at that time, or whether you're someone that just, got your first contract and you're looking to make this your living, right?
Yeah.
You're putting in all the time and effort, and you're spending all the money to build out whatever you want to stream, your computer, your system, your office, however you're going to do this. And at the end of the day, they don't give it much more consideration. They testify that to them, it was just how they were going to pay you. The rest of the stuff didn't matter.
Yeah. So one question that I have about the contract is, there's sort of, I was talking a little bit earlier about the terms of service and the contract, how those two are kind of like competing sources of like the rules that everyone's supposed to abide by, right? Did the contract ever actually refer to the terms of service and the community guidelines?
It does not.
That blows my mind.
Right.
It blows my mind. I assumed when I was first, analyzing these issues over the summer, I assumed that these kinds of platforms were going to incorporate those because that would give them a ton of leverage in these contracts.
I suspect it may now.
Well, yeah.
I've seen a present contract from the individuals I've been talking to. If anyone reaching out, if they got treated by Twitch unfairly, and there is a on the I think termination clause, there's another line that adds in the terms of service, so it is there.
Wow.
I'll tell you what I thought was super telling and shows you how their lack of concern for these quote terms of service or rules, if you will, is we asked over and over again, when you're dealing with partners, they know where to send James' check, right? They know how to contact them via email. Mm-hmm. If you were going to update the terms of service and it's that important, wouldn't you send an email that says, hey, by the way, we changed this thing, we want you to follow it. And then I ask questions about TwitchCon, where you get all these streamers that come together. If you want to make sure everyone is truly following the quote rules, whatever you're going to make them to be, even though they change depending on who you are, wouldn't you have like a session where you could bring in all these streamers and let them ask questions about what is the, what would you get banned for, what you wouldn't, what rule means this, what rule means that? And the fact that they don't do that shows their just lack of concern for it. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of gets back to the strike guide. I don't know if James told you, the analogy they used for why they wanted to keep it confidential, and it still kind of befuddles me, is it's like if you were going to be speeding and you somehow wanted to know what the speed gun was set at, you would then push your nose, right up to the line. Mm-hmm. But the problem, of course, is that's the wrong analogy. The question is, if you're driving down the road and they don't post a speed limit and they're going to pull you over and charge you for speeding, don't you think they need to tell you what the speed limit is?
Yeah, it's a perfect example during trial that was given. It was just didn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and it just kind of comes back to, look, you've got a company, it's part of Amazon making billions of dollars, that at the end of the day, they're not worried about the streamers. They're worried about doing whatever they want. Yeah. And if they want to put somebody up, that's fine. If they want to take them off, that's their attitude. That's fine too. They don't want to create a platform where, people have rules that they believe they can follow, and they're going to get Twitch to follow those rules as well. And I mean that, the basic, like, bare essence, right? That's a contract. Like, I can count on you to do what you say in the contract. You count on me to do what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm going to use a legal term, right? What you understand, it's illusionary. Meaning it means nothing, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want that. And you've got, and I've told James this, I have a son who does this, and I look at this and I say, you're getting into a system here that either we as a government have to regulate, because you can't count on the businesses to do it, because they're just going to do whatever they want. And take it to its logical conclusion. They could decide, because they don't like you, because you got black hair, you got blonde hair, they're just going to get rid of you because they have too many blonde streamers. They want something else. I mean, it's nuts. Yeah. And they would tell you, if you really put them under oath and asked them, that yes, they can do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's wild. I mean, they actually, so at trial, that actually was their argument that they made. Is that correct? More or less.
Back to black hair and blonde hair people.
I mean,
their argument was, just to be clear, their argument was, it's our platform. And I'll quote Jason Masis, who was at one point the head of the partnership conduct team. We can do business with whomever we want. Said differently, the terms of service, the community guidelines, the contract, none of that matters. But we, Twitch, can do business with whomever we want.
And the speeding example was given by Brad Ramey, who is a current partner manager. So yes, that was said at trial as the reason for why they don't give out the strike guide.
So it seems like they're operating under the assumption that people are going to try to push the boundaries as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, but
it's good for the brand, because remember, for every subscriber, they make money too, and they make money off the advertisements, and now they have the bounty board, so they make money off that too.
Yeah, and
they have the God, I'm going to forget what the term is, but they created like a currency system for donations. What's it called, James?
Bits. Yeah, their in-house donation system.
Right, where they take a piece of that too. So at the end of the day, they recognize they're the dominant platform, and they just, again, it's Amazon, right? They can do whatever they want.
Right.
I mean, this is big corporations.
And this is one argument that a lot of people have, is that, you know, when it comes to this kind of topic about differences in moderation on these social media platforms, one of the arguments that people kind of come back with is, well, these are private corporations. They can do whatever they want, right? Because technically they're not government. They're not part of the government. They're not public utilities. But
ABC is a private corporation. So is NBC, right? And they can't do whatever they want. The New York Times is a private corporation. So is the Washington Post. I believe the Washington Post might be owned by Bezos as well. I could be wrong, but I think so. And they can't do what they want there.
Yeah.
The difference, right? So, you know, because they recognize that it's a medium and a platform to deliver news. And, you know, you don't regulate it to squelch speech, which is essentially what Twitch wants to be able to do, right? You have to be, you know, you have to have, you know, be egalitarian in how you utilize your, you know, whatever the system is. You got to be fair to everyone. And just like you got to, you know, you can't pick a Democratic candidate and let them say something, or in Twitch is concerned, you know, a Republican candidate or whatever. You've got to provide equal time for everyone, and you've got to do it in a fair way and charge them the same rate. So we regulate those systems that are not, you know, that are public corporations too. So when you recognize what it is, especially when you see the world changing, which, you know, the new TV stations for people of my son's generation, you know, are all done through the internet. You know what I mean? There is no like Thursday night TV that Shonda Rhimes used to own at one point, right? Now it's just, you know, that was her line, I think, at the Dartmouth convention or commencement address at one point. But, you know, there isn't that anymore because it's all on demand. And, you know, the Netflix, right, the Amazon Prime, the Hulu, those places, they're delivering the same content as ABC, NBC, all those places. But, you know, under 230, they may be regulated different. And I think we've got to look at that because you've got people that are expecting a fair, you know, playing field, right? And you're not getting that. And that's just not right.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I could talk about Section 230 pretty much all day. I think you probably could too.
In addition to this, I'm on a national commission where we looked at 230. Where we have, you know, law professors and different people representing different states, you know, appointed by government officials. We tried to look at it to try and write laws that, you know, affected that. It had, you know, had a little bit to do with, it was ancillarily involved, but I mean, that issue has been raised. And you've seen it over and over again. And I do think we have to look at it. The problem, of course, you have is who has all the leverage in Washington, right? It's the big tech companies, the streamers who, you know, are all not united in any way, at least at the moment, though, you know, we hope to, you know, through things like this, maybe try and bring people together to look at them as a group that are being, you know, disparately oppressed, if you will, by big companies like Twitch when they decide to impose these rules without any pushback from them. That, you know, they don't have that ability to lobby. They don't have that political sophistication. They don't have the, you know, speed dial to call the biggest lobbyist in DC like you do if you're Amazon, right? Or your Facebook or your, they don't have that ability. So we have a law that's written right now that I think people need to look at. And, you know, we need the fix for the, you know, the people that are coming up to make sure we do have a fair playing field. Agreed.
And yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about Section 230. It's one of those that probably needs to be amended. And I think, I mean, it's looking to me like there's increasing support from both sides of the political aisle. So at least there's that. I mean, that usually is a, I mean, I would at least hope is a good indication that maybe there's change on the horizon of some sort. Of course, they're you know, depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on, that the divide tends to be for different reasons, right? So people on the left tend to want to reform it because they're more concerned about the spread of misinformation. People on the right tend to be more concerned about sort of these sort of issues of conservative voices. I mean, that's not the case in this case with what happened with you know, with James, but with disparate moderation of these platforms, depending on, I mean, what people on the right are saying is, you know, for political views. But, you know, in this case, it had nothing to do with politics, but it had to do with, you know, the way that some people are treated on Twitch as opposed to other people.
I mean, it's bare essence. If you can choose who you put up and who you don't, and it's not a fair and equal playing field. It's just censorship. There is no other way to call it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And that is, you know, what at least I like to think most of, you know, America believes so strongly in, that like when you have these platforms that we have an opportunity to hear these ideas, and it's a First Amendment issue, right? And that we get to hear that and see that. When you look at what the ACLU, you know, the Civil Liberties Union has fought so hard for, you know, even if it's things that shock the conscience, right? Especially, right? That's what they do, because they believe that to some people that's art. You don't have to look at it, but we have a right to see those and hear those systems. And when you have things like Twitch, where they say, well, we're just going to decide how we want, and we are the largest platform. And there was testimony that, you know, it's getting better as time goes on, but they were literally the only show in town that essentially, you know, and again, they're more like ABC, NBC, you know, Fox, you fill it in, that what they're doing is they're just censoring people that they don't like. And that's wrong.
Yeah. So we do have a question here, a super chat that I will bring up. So he's asking, this is Manny Fabani. Thank you for the super chat. PhantomL0rd, do you get compensated for the time you lost, all the income you could have made in the meantime? I think this is maybe one of the questions that may or may not be able to be answered at this time, but I don't know, maybe you guys can.
Just to simply go into it, it's still an ongoing thing. All that about the financials is still progressing. So much like the original, when the case was filed, I can't talk about the deals, and that's kind of the same thing here. So at one point I will be able to, but as of right now, no, I can't.
And as you understand, there's some things the judge has to look at. We have an unfair competition claim as well, that triggers a lot of other things. And there'll be what they call, you know, post-judgment motions, right? Dealing with it, trying to, you know, before this all gets final, you've got to do a few other things, and we've got to have this unfair competition claim heard, which we feel good about given the jury's, you know, verdict on things like good faith and unfair dealing. Which is essentially that, you know, if Twitch is putting out these rules and saying that these rules you can follow, but then they can get rid of you any way they want, well, that's not really fair competition. And if you're a young streamer trying to get involved and you're counting on that, you know, are they using this for an unfair basis? And this is what we'll litigate. But you know, the way it works in California, the judge will decide that. That's not a jury question, but he will look at the jury's findings, which in James's case, and I think you've seen it, it's a 40-page verdict. So unlike a typical, well, you know, I don't know if anything's typical anymore, but unlike a lot of verdicts that will just, you know, be very basic and kind of what are the elements of the claim, they might be 1, 2, 3 pages long. This one is very detailed in its factual findings. And that's where you can really see how they felt about some of Twitch's conduct as they went through.
So that is accessible through the docket to the case, right?
It should be. I can't tell you with certainty. I mean, we have, I actually, I'm not sure I have the actual copy. I have one that was filled out as the jury read the verdict, if that makes sense. So I had it. I suspect it is. I just, to be very honest, I haven't.
If it is, then it should be filed pretty soon.
So I have.
It's a public document. So it's probably the best way to answer.
So so if anyone is curious, I have in the description of this video already a link to the docket, so you can see all of these documents, all of like the complaint that we've been talking about. You know, the amended cross complaint, the second amended cross complaint that Twitch filed against James, and you know, all of the other pleadings and all of the other motions in this case. It goes back a long time, but I have a link to that in the description if anyone is curious about it. I also have, you know, we've mentioned. I mentioned my video on Dr. Disrespect earlier. That's also linked below, and an explainer on what Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is. So to give a background on where the law came from, kind of why it came about, and you know, some of the issues that some people have with it. So with that, I mean, I guess the only other thing that we haven't talked about in the complaint is the misrepresentation claims. We can kind of talk about those sort of together, because one of them was intentional misrepresentation, and then the other one is negligent misrepresentation, and they're very similar, right? So what was the misrepresentation that Twitch made in this case?
Do you want me to answer that, James, or do you, or how do you want to handle it?
I mean, I can just answer simply, but you can elaborate a little further. I mean, it's just, it goes back to what I was talking about with my partner manager, Opie, talking to me about what I can and cannot do. And then, during the trial, the evidence of that coming out, and it was just misleading. He was, trying to educate me on certain things, but not being clear and just kind of misleading me in the wrong direction. And essentially, I was punished because of these things. And they brought up the trial, all the violations I did, when some of them I was never even told about. I mean, they kept blasting to the jury 34 violations, something like that. And I went back into my conversations with Opie. 17 of them I was only even informed of, including some emails. So there was just a huge disconnect there, which, I'm sure is happening with a lot of other people now, but Bill, you can elaborate further.
Yeah. And some of their, in the lawsuit, some of Twitch's, I guess, reasons why they banned you were things like, what were they? I mean, basically that you had violated the terms of service in a number of ways, right? If I was reading that there was an issue about streaming non-gaming content for more than 30 minutes. There was an issue about fraudulent subscribers. There was an issue about being not being forthright about your ownership or alleged ownership of this company, CSGO Shuffle, right? This website that is, I think, we can all see what's going on in the comments there, right? In the stream comments that, there are people that think that you are an owner of this company. But we might as well just get into that. I mean, that was one of the main allegations that they had against you. And this is what I meant earlier when I said that there's a court of public opinion and a court of law. And in this case, this was an issue that is in the court of public opinion that was actually tried and put in front of a jury, and a jury made determinations based off of evidence, right? So they alleged that you had undisclosed financial interest in this website, CSGO Shuffle, and then that you used it to rig jackpots in your favor against users that you'd gained from Twitch, and that you operated in contravention of the terms of the underlying game's publisher and potentially in violation of the law. So one thing that happens, let me just kind of set the stage here for all of the viewers out there, that when there is a material issue in a case, and then that case goes to the point of discovery. Discovery is the process of gaining evidence from the other side, where both sides they're able to request all kinds of information. And, this is when you have depositions. This is when you produce documents. This is when you respond to written questions. And so when the other side requests information from you that otherwise might be insanely private, but it's kind of necessary in order to prove the truth or falsity of a claim, they're able to request all of that up to whatever is really necessary or likely to lead to information that would be helpful in the case. So in this case, I know I was watching your live stream last week, James, that you were talking about this, that Twitch had requested from you through the process of this lawsuit. They requested all of your you might as well. Why don't you tell everybody?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to be straightforward, they requested a blanket of things, and I gave over everything. I mean, all of my bank records from 2012 to I think 2020, my tax returns, all of that stuff. They also requested conversations that I had from companies like Gmail, Google, Skype, I think Discord, and other things, and I gave them permission to get that stuff. So I mean, I literally gave over everything that I have, or have still, I guess, to take a look at, and that's something that you have to do in discovery.
Yeah. So all of your bank records, all your tax documents, your tax returns, and all of that, they had pretty much everything that they were able to dig through and try to find some evidence to back up this claim that you had this undisclosed ownership of this website. And I guess I just realized I didn't really explain what CS:GO Shuffle is. For people that don't know, maybe James, you can explain what CS:GO is and what CS:GO Shuffle is or was, or I don't know if it still exists. I'm not
Sure.
I'm not familiar.
It's a little complicated. I'll be kind of brief on it.
Mhm.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive is the name of a game. It's a video game that's owned by Valve. It's on the Steam platform, and CS:GO is short for it. Inside this game, there was an ecosystem for digital virtual skins. So it was a first-person shooter where you have guns, and you could have a gun that had a different color, and that would be called a skin. And these skins would have value attached to them based on the marketplace inside of this game. So, I mean, it was immensely popular. Every single streamer that you can think of did it at one point. And during this time, you're able to trade skins to other players. Well, people kind of figured out you can make these websites where you have these different gambling games, game modes that could essentially offer a game or a game mode, and these players could put their skins into, say, like a pot, for example, and one person could win, and then the site would take a cut, and that kind of blew up in 2015 to 2016, and then I think it progressed in 2017 onwards until it kind of slowed down and stopped, and now it's progressed over to casino games. But that's the gist of it. And CS:GO Shuffle, sorry to elaborate on that, was one of those websites.
Okay, so there seem to be two basic allegations here that they had against you, and that it seems to sort of come up on social media and comments and stuff from people that seem to be very angry. That there was the first kind of allegation there is that you had some sort of ownership interest in CS:GO Shuffle that you didn't disclose to them. So they were able to get evidence to prove or disprove that, right?
Correct. So like during trial, I gave over all evidence that they requested. I think they're called RFAs or something like that, or requests for admissions or stuff like that. And you have to tell them. And during this time, I showed and I proved that I don't own any part of Shuffle, and I never did. It goes from having access to the backend to owning the domain, to owning any of the accounts, to owning the financials. All that stuff I had no ownership of.
Okay, and then the other allegation was that you had rigged Jackpots on that website, because it was kind of a gambling sort of site is sort of how you described it. They said that you were rigging Jackpots and otherwise manipulating the gambling outcomes on CS:GO Shuffle, and that's I think another thing that's sort of come up in comments on Twitter and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I can elaborate on that as well.
Yeah. What was the evidence on that?
So yeah, there's of course that was brought up and discussed too, and there's a document that I have, which I'm going to be going a little bit more into detail on my YouTube channel on this further. There's a profit loss and data sheet that goes over every single user that ever played on CS:GO Shuffle, and the statistics behind that. And if you combine the two accounts that I played on, I actually was negative 91,000 in total as a profit and loss. And looking at my numbers, there was 100,000 rounds that happened on the site. I only participated in 4,530 of those rounds. I won 1,746 of those rounds, which means overall I entered into less than 4.5% of all the rounds that ever happened on the site. So the allegations are sort of straight up not true.
Okay, so between that and then the bank records that they were looking for, sort of evidence of your financial interest in CS:GO Shuffle, right? Is that what they were looking for with those records? Yeah,
I mean, anything and everything. Again, I turned over that I have for them to go through and to sort of prove. And again, there's nothing for that. So whatever they asked for, I did essentially.
So basically, I mean, that to me personally, I mean, I always try to be as unbiased in all of these videos on this channel as possible, as middle of the road and whatnot. And but to me, I mean, that sounds pretty convincing, because the fact that they're able to request literally everything, and I mean, barring, except for some legal objections that you can make, you pretty much have to give over everything that you have. And if they couldn't find anything for those, I mean, that to me personally, as as another attorney that has no skin in the game, that sounds to me like pretty convincing.
And I'll tell you one other thing, which I thought was interesting, is all these videos that they later claim, James had violated the rules. Twitch didn't have any of those. They didn't save any of them.
Yes. Specifically giveaway.
The videos they had to get that they played, they had to go to YouTube and get them from other people who had taken some of James's videos because they thought they were funny or something and put them on their own YouTube channel. I mean, so you would think if this was so, egregious, that you would save that. And they didn't even have James's signature on the terms of service or any of that, which they thought he was bound by. The only signature they had was the contract.
Wow. So I mean, yeah, one would think, I mean, given the level of anger that people that are angry, the level of anger that they seem to have in comments, one would think that they would have gone digging and finding those kinds of videos if they were so angry about that kind of stuff, right?
And well, if it made such a difference, why wouldn't you put it in a file and hold it, right? If it was like so outrageous and you're talking about it internally and you want to make sure this doesn't happen again, and you think that you're going to ban someone because of it, wouldn't you keep, I mean, you're a lawyer, you'd tell them to keep the evidence to say,
of course,
look, here's why we banned them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which goes to the point that they certainly didn't care or consider it, or, it certainly lends itself to that argument.
Yeah, it definitely, there were a lot of points in this case, both in the time leading up to the ban and then during the litigation itself, that, I mean, just as someone who has, like, again, no skin in the game, just looking through the docket and reading through this information, that I just was very surprised by some of these decisions that were being made by Twitch, both, I guess, with their corporate counsel and then with their litigation team. It just, I was very surprised for a company that has as much money as they do. They were burning a lot of cash, and it seems like it was not, not strategically sound, I guess, would be one way to put it. But I also don't want to, obviously, I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, and I don't want to disparage anyone, a fellow member of the California bar, or any bar really. But I was very surprised by some of these decisions that they were making. So that, yeah.
I think you mentioned also that some of these decisions were happening during the trial.
Yes.
So even last second they were doing things. As I said earlier, they're Amazon. They're funded. They get whatever they want, and they were filing every single thing they could possibly do, even during the trial.
Yeah. So one thing that I was a little bit baffled by. Okay, so just to, as a little bit of background for people that are the uninitiated, if they're not familiar. So this, obviously, I mentioned that this is a second amended complaint second amended cross complaint that we're looking at. So a cross complaint is where somebody who is a defendant in a lawsuit turns around and sues the other side. And when you have a complaint or a cross complaint that is somehow deficient, the other side files what's called either a motion to dismiss, or in this case, a demur. In California court, it's called that. I have no idea why. They just wanted to be funky, I guess. But either a motion to dismiss or a demur, basically saying that this complaint has all kinds of issues and it needs to be dismissed. The court, even if they dismiss it, they often give multiple opportunities for you to go back and kind of fix your complaint, fix whatever issues that they found, come back, file an amended complaint. After you file an amended one, then you get a second amended complaint. You might even get a third amended complaint. Obviously, it only goes so far before a judge just says, all right, that's enough. You've had enough chances. But so this one was a second amended complaint after you guys had demurred both the cross complaint and their first amended cross complaint. After trial began, I noticed in the docket that they had requested to the court to file a third amended complaint. This was after trial had already begun. I was a little bit baffled by that because I'm just thinking about, I've been part of a litigation team preparing for trial, and I understand that that's a major undertaking and a lot of organization and trying to get your theory right, trying to get all of your ducks in a row. and having, after trial has already begun, trying to file yet another amended complaint, it was a little bit baffling to me. I don't know, Bill, can you comment on that, on those issues, like what was going on with that?
I mean, other than to say Twitch wanted to change, at least from our perspective, some of their theories of the concealment claim that they had, and as far as what they thought their misrepresentation claim, at least from our perspective, they sought leave to do that. We objected, and the court denied it.
Yeah.
And you know, our point was they had known about it for a long time. If they truly wanted to change it, it's unfair to do it at the end.
Right.
And you know, I think at that point you're talking about what the verdict form would look like, but we thought it was unfair, and we objected, and the court sided with us.
Yeah. So it is. I mean, it is possible to amend a complaint after trial has begun if you have recently learned of new information. But in this case, I noticed that I think it was like information that they had gotten from James's deposition back in December or something, and this was now April. That they were like, oh, by the way, we have this new information that we need to suddenly amend our complaint. I was thinking what may have happened is either someone on the team was like, oops, we forgot to do this thing. And they tried to sort of, I don't know, bootstrap themselves back in there. But, or, I mean, that's, I guess, maybe the more optimistic side of it, or at worst, maybe a dirty litigation tactic. I don't know. But that's all just kind of speculation on my part, because again, I'm just sort of an outside observer.
Yeah, all I would say is they hired very talented lawyers that work very hard.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So basically, I think we've pretty much gone through all of the allegations, like in your complaint and then in the cross complaint. And then, I mean, we've talked about Section 230. So some of the stuff that kind of came up at trial, I know we've sort of touched on it. The strike guide was one thing. You had mentioned to me before, James, when we were talking, something about a limited liability clause that came up as an issue. I don't know, maybe Bill can tell us about that, or maybe James, you can tell us about that too, if you.
I mean, what I want to just tell everyone is that there was a mini trial that we had before this trial, and it was just strictly over this limited liability clause. That again, Twitch admitted that this is a standard contract that hundreds of thousands of people have to this day, and this clause is most likely there, where it just, if you try to sue, you can only sue for $50,000. Well, we fought that over in trial, and we won, and the judge threw that out. I mean, this affects everyone, and these are the steps that we've had to go through. Similar with this trial and winning overall, it affects everybody, and it's just unfair. And the judge saw that, and that's why he threw it out.
Yeah, James hit that right. So I mean, it covers everything from attorney's fees to you name it, cap at 50,000.
Right.
And the judge went and kind of waived various due process issues, and at the end said, look, no lawyer would take a case if you could only be capped at 50,000. And what from our perspective, it was just oppressive conduct again. We're the big streaming platform. We're going to make you sign this. And God forbid we do something wrong, we'll limit whatever our exposure is to a maximum of 50,000. And they had big firm lawyers writing it. You had James, who at that point was, I think, 24 and working at Best Buy and trying to go through work, get through college, right? So you've got kind of disparate, abilities to sort of evaluate and negotiate, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we were able to get that thrown out. I mean, this has been a long process. Things have been fought, tooth and nail to get here. A lot of money has been spent by Twitch. I mean, just on one, they had multiple experts. One expert alone, they spent $500,000 or more than $500,000 just to, make certain points to, prevent James from prevailing here. It's been, not something that's for the meek, and it's not something that the average person can fund and afford and
right.
Put that type of effort toward. So
right.
It's been a long journey, to say the least.
Can I ask if they ever tried to, if there were ever any, I don't know how much you can comment on settlement negotiations, but was there an attempt to settle this case?
I don't think I can comment on the exact offers, but I could say we had a mediation, And I think the best I could say is it was not something that kept James awake at night, worrying about whether he should accept it or not.
Okay, so it was something that he could easily walk away from, in other words.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
But like I said, I think there wasn't a ton of discussions. We did go through a mediation.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of angst on our side trying to figure out how to go forward. And obviously, Twitch can make whatever decision they can, but it takes two to tango in those, and you need someone that's willing to step in and do that. And for whatever reason, they were in different positions.
Yeah, yeah. So we have another super chat that I'll bring up here. So Scott Romero, thank you for your super chat. So we have, can we just answer yes or no? PhantomL0rd, I love you, bro. But did you ever have a partner rigging the percent of outcome regardless of the 91K win loss? So we kind of touched on that earlier.
I mean, obviously no. And that's what the math kind of proves that. That's the documents that I turned over show that that's not the case. And even with my conversations, I agreed for Twitch to have. I mean, they gave them everything. So, and that was all discussed at trial.
Yeah, and the jury looked at all that.
Right, James?
Yes. No.
Unequivocally no. And
yes,
and,
I think that's
and again,
what Scott's looking for. No.
Yeah, and again, this was an actual jury of 12 people, right? That looked at this and looked at all the evidence.
16, and then we lost one, and then we let 3 go that were alternates. We picked out of I don't know if it was a hat or a wheel or something to figure out what people would be let go and what would deliberate.
Yeah. So okay, so interesting. And also another interesting aspect of this case was that this was all pretty much done by Zoom, right? This whole trial.
Most of the witnesses, other than James, were done by Zoom. The lawyers were in the courtroom, and the jurors were spread out in a special courtroom. So they sat as much in the, in the galley, if you will, or in the audience, and then you had some in the jury box. So it was a little unique in that.
Okay.
And I mean, just like I said, even the cost for the setup to have video, we had TVs everywhere, speakers everywhere. We had to hire 2 separate IT people to manage who was going to testify, how they were going to handle that, what documents they would see, and all the, and the like. And so it was challenging and expensive, to say the least. I mean, this is, like I said, but so I think I'm pretty sure every witness other than James was via video. I could be wrong on something, but I don't think so. I think that's right.
So, but the jury was actually in the same room, but just sort of socially distanced then?
Correct. With the lawyers.
Yeah. Right. Okay. That makes sense. So, that's interesting. And obviously there are some sort of challenges that come with that, with trying to, do a direct examination of a witness and a cross-examination of a witness, and how that comes across to a jury through a video screen, but hey, there you have it. So it's kind of a new world, I guess.
Yeah, it is an emerging world, and it makes sense in a tech case, I guess, if you're going to try it. And everyone was wearing masks, so you couldn't see the jury's reaction to certain things, which if you're in my business, that's what you kind of look for. And because they were not just to your left, they were behind you, there was a lot of me trying to look back to see, how people were taking in this or that. You like to get a feel of, when you're asking questions, is it too little? Is it too much? How much time to spend on something? Is it resonating? And so that made those challenges.
Right. It was weird. I had to wear a mask while testifying, and I kind of hoped I didn't, but just talking through a mask, and I keep having to move it up and back and forth. It moves around when you talk.
Yeah,
it was definitely interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely is going to add some challenge to it, right? So, so I guess another thing that when James, when you and I were talking earlier, was that another thing that sounds like it came out at trial was that the ban was supposedly for a PR reason. There were some sort of internal documents about that. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so it was pretty much admitted at trial that the ban was for PR reasons. I mean, the number one thing that people need to understand is there was no investigation done. I mean, we said that, and our opening bill said that, and they didn't prove any kind of investigation at all. I mean, when you get accused of something, you would hope that your story would be heard. That wasn't the case. And also, you know, the ban, it gives this public perception of them investigating to finding out that, you know, if this stuff is true, and it gives a perception of guilt. And that's what my whole issue has been, is just finding this is not true. None of these allegations are true. And they admitted during trial that it was for PR reasons. There's all this tension that existed at the time, and even still now today, of partners getting treated differently. And they used me as an example to prove. The examples I give through with there was Mo, who had a Cisco Diamonds kind of scandal beforehand, T. Martin Syndicate, Joshua G., who had their Cisco Lotto example. And then I was just the third strike. They used me as an example, kind of in the perfect scenario with the tension of the Cisco gambling scene, with other people having all this stuff happen on Twitch, and Twitch supposedly allowing it, and then partners getting treated differently, and they just, perfect scenario for them to get rid of me.
Wow. So, and so when you say it was for a PR reason, that basically was PR for Twitch, basically so that they have controversy around them and people are talking about Twitch streaming?
Yes. Yeah. Jason Maestas, the person who made the trigger, said that, you know, there was a PR. It was a PR reason.
There was a lot of pressure that people were putting on saying partners were being treated different than the public. And there's internal documents talking about that.
Yeah.
And there's one, I think it's a gentleman by the name of Tyler Nasenzo, if I'm saying it right, that made the comment after they banned James or permanently suspended him, saying, if anyone ever complains we treat partners different after this should do it. Meaning, you know, we've got to, you know, whatever, it's the Thomas Wolfe line about steam control. Like, you know, there's a lot of pressure building up. We got to look for someone, you know, you see it in politics, who can take the fall for everybody else so we can keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And James happened to be there. These allegations came out. They cared less about the allegations more than he was the, you know, either the right person at the wrong time, or however you want to phrase that. And they went ahead and did that. They cared less about what was said about him. It was just more about making an example so that people would stop complaining about how they were providing disparate treatment for partners, and certain partners that, you know, they can go about, you know, whatever they lost in dollars for James, they would make up by keeping everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's also an internal conversation about them talking about streamers like Legendary Leah and Wreckful, like admitting that they're being treated differently. So it was just all over the place, these facts.
Wow. So, I mean, it sounds like, but under the current laws right now, I know we were talking about Section 230 earlier, but under the current laws right now, I don't know if anything can really be done about that. I mean, Bill, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, you know, we got to look at how this verdict shakes out, right? And see what it means in California, because it still would be the law of the land in California. Mm-hmm. We need to look at 230, and we need to try and look at what can be done on a larger scale to try and help all these other streamers. We have this unfair competition claim, which is part of the relief we can get. We can get an injunction against Twitch. And at least as far as, you know, my law firm and the lawyers that have been part of James's legal team are looking at is, what specific type of injunction do we want to get to try and not just help James, obviously, but to try and leave some sort of lasting impact so that this, what we think is unfair competition, can be rectified somehow.
Right.
And streamers can have that fair platform.
Right.
So, you know, there's a few chapters to write in this book left, and we're trying to do that.
Yeah.
And do it in a way that, you know, makes this case bigger than James, recognizing that, you know, from just a monetary time, and frankly, just from a mental standpoint, to go for the many years to do this, that it's not something that's available to everybody.
Right.
And so we're looking at that very closely. We're in the process really of trying that case, and we're going to file briefs and the like as well, where we're going to specifically ask for that. Okay. So, I mean, I think, at least from my perspective of how do we try and do that, knowing the 230's out there, is we're going to try and use this unfair competition law in California to try and add a little more bite to what the jury had said.
Okay, interesting. That'll be really interesting to find out what comes out of that.
Well,
so
share it with you, and hopefully, you know, come back to talk about it.
I'm all ears. Absolutely. So any idea on a timeline on that issue?
Well, we've got to file. We're in the process of working it through right now. We've got to file briefs at the end. I think we're going to meet with the lawyers for Twitch to kind of come up with a timeline on that. I suspect it'll be done by the end of the summer or no later than. That's
Okay.
we want to get it resolved as soon as we can, but
Yeah.
you know, once you even put it in the judge's lap, then it's, in this case, it's up to him to decide when he's going to decide. But he's been, you know, pretty quick within, you know, and diligent in deciding that. So I would think that's a reasonable time frame.
Okay. Okay. So I will be looking out for that for sure. And I would love to have you guys back on for that. And so I guess before we wrap this up, I mean, James, we've been talking about all the stuff that's happened, all of the allegations, you know, and that on both sides, right? You know, and we haven't really talked too much about how this lawsuit has affected you. I mean, because this is something that people don't really know unless they are somehow intimately involved with a lawsuit, either them or a loved one, or maybe they're an attorney, they're a litigator, and they see it every day. But these lawsuits can have a huge effect on your entire life, right? So
Yep.
I guess talk a little bit about that so that people can have some sort of an understanding of what it's like to go through a lawsuit that's lasting a number of years.
I mean, it's basically it's a living hell, and that's kind of why the reason people have seen I'm back now trying to advocate for people who have been treated misfairly by Twitch, because I don't want other people to go through the same experience. It's you know, going up against the Goliath of the Twitch and Amazon, as I said, it's not only just costly, it's insanely difficult. I mean, to keep your head above level and, you know, not kind of lose out. And I've had many hours of sleep lost, you know, just from not even being able to talk about what I'm discovering. I mean, that's also something that's really cruel. But I'm just kind of fed up with how Twitch has been treating people, and these examples are coming out even to this day. I think the most recent one was Destiny getting banned for having someone else show a picture. It was not intentional. You know, they've been saying context matters. It's not something that he intended to do. And this is his lifeline. He lost it. He might have some other means, but to the average streamer, there's no way for them to come back. And I have interviewed people already about this that have been mistreated. There's no way for people to kind of get hurt. And it sucks. It's terrible. You know, again, I'm not trying to victimize myself or anything, but depression, you know, anxiety, whatever. I never even knew about those things until this case, until this lawsuit, really. And I just don't want people to go through that. So that's kind of why I'm here talking to you, talking to other people, because I want people to be educated that this is not right and things need to change.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there needs to be some sort of a grassroots effort. I mean, to come against Twitch, which is owned by Amazon. I mean, it's definitely a David and Goliath sort of story. So, I mean, you guys obviously are very passionate about this. And I mean, I completely agree with what you guys are saying here, that there are some things that probably need to be changed in terms of the laws. But with that, I mean, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about, want to mention?
I guess just adding on to what I said earlier, if there's anyone that has been mistreated, you know, send me an email. I have it on my Twitter and my Facebook. I'm constantly talking to people about this stuff. I just want it to stop. I want, you know, us to kind of stand up, and people have been publicly voicing how they're frustrated with Twitch for so long. And it's now, you know, it's now time to kind of put our foot down and do something about it. And this lawsuit could be kind of the backbone of proving these facts that have been coming out through discovery and not only a trial, to show to, you know, other streamers that you can't be treated like this. This is something that, you know, jury has found is not right, and it needs to stop. So reach out to me if you're someone that's been mistreated, or if you know of anyone else, reach out. I have PhantomL0rdbusiness@gmail.com. It's on my Twitter and Facebook if you want to find it. And just talk to me about your story, and I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
And we can see what we can do.
And I'll put your email in the description of this video as well to make it easier as well. Okay, so with that, Bill, any other thoughts that you wanted to add, or have we covered pretty much everything?
I think we have. I mean, we can go on forever. You know, the trial itself was, I mean, almost 30 days. So there's a lot to talk about, but I think we covered the highlights. And like I said, hopefully when we put the unfair competition claim together, that there'll be more, you know, this is just the beginning of a conversation that hopefully, you know, all the other streamers that, you know, didn't have the same kind of following as James can now hopefully come together to make sure we get equality on these platforms.
Yeah, yeah, and just to clarify, so that people fully understand. So you had, in your complaint, you had 4 causes of action. In the Twitch's second amended cross complaint, they had 3, which became 2. 1 was dismissed. So they basically had 2 causes of action on all of those issues. Did the jury side with you, or were there any sort of issues, any sort of points where they sided with Twitch?
They didn't side with Twitch at all.
Got it.
The only one they did not find in James's favor was on the intentional misrepresentation, which they found that it was negligent, that it was reckless, but
Okay.
they couldn't get their arms around whether or not it was intentional of Twitch to try and deceive James and do that. Was it just reckless versus that, which is a question of degrees. And so they did not find the intentional misrepresentation.
Okay.
But
But they did find that there were misrepresentations, aka lies.
100%.
Okay. Okay. So okay, so I guess that's about it. If you guys enjoyed this this live stream and you want to support our channel, we're growing. We just hit over 3,000 subscribers. We're marching our way to 4,000 next. So if you guys enjoyed this, I'd really appreciate it if you guys would like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want to help us grow. And otherwise, if you like this kind of content and you want to see more stuff like this and you want to really support us, we also have a Patreon account. So anyway, with that, I guess.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you so much. It was lovely.
Yes.
Thanks for your interest in this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me here.
Right.
All right. Thanks.